His wife was pregnant, yet the husband tried to kill her. With one blow, he broke her ribs, but even then, he didn't stop. He grabbed her by the collar and slapped her so hard that she tumbled down the stairs. Unable to endure any longer, the terrified wife hurriedly hid in the basement. Seeing this, the husband swung his club, striking the door again and again. While inside, the wife was so frightened that she lost control of her bladder. The next day when the police arrived, the wife had already become a cold corpse. During the autopsy, the forensic doctor found as many as 54 internal injuries all over the woman's body, along with fractures in 7 places. Her stomach was filled with various pills, but among them was a medication used to treat athlete's foot. However, when the forensic doctor pried open the woman's toes to smell them, he discovered that she did not have athlete's foot. What was even more shocking was that when the forensic doctor cut open the woman's uterus, he found a fetus inside that was about 2 months old. Seeing this scene, everyone present was visibly shaken. No one could understand how a husband could be so cruel to his own wife. After seeing this, prosecutor Ying Shuo didn't wait for the forensic results to come out. He immediately summoned the woman's husband for questioning. However, this rich second-generation heir relied on having the most authoritative lawyer by his side. He invoked his right to remain silent and refused to answer any of Ying Shuo's questions. He even brazenly ate sashimi right in front of Ying Shuo in the interrogation room, and managed to turn the tables on him. The opposing lawyer produced a surveillance video showing that when the rich heir left home, his wife was still seen inside the house. This was meant to prove that the wife was still alive when the rich heir left, and they wanted to use this video to make Ying Shuo drop the charges. When Ying Shuo left the interrogation room, the forensic team also released the autopsy report. However, the report stated that the woman was not beaten to death, but died from drug poisoning. Nevertheless, Ying Shuo still firmly trusted his own instincts. He immediately went to the rich heir's house and found the housekeeper. Because the housekeeper had come with the murdered woman when she got married, she directly told Ying Shuo about the domestic violence the woman suffered every day, and expressed her willingness to testify against the rich heir in court. So the next day, Ying Shuo filed a lawsuit against the rich heir. The housekeeper also testified in court, revealing everything about the rich heir's abuse of his wife. With the housekeeper's testimony and the photo showing the woman's body covered in injuries, Ying Shuo thought this would be enough to convict the rich heir. Unexpectedly, the opposing lawyer directly requested the forensic examiner who performed the autopsy to appear in court. However, based on the test results, the forensic examiner stated that the woman's death was not caused by the beating, but by drug poisoning. Because the woman had undergone heart valve surgery, the heart medication she had been taking for a long time reacted pharmacologically with other drugs, resulting in her accidental death. Due to insufficient evidence, in the end, the judge announced the conclusion of the first trial and stated that if In-suk still couldn't find evidence of the rich second generation's guilt in the second trial, he would acquit him. The next evening, unwilling to give up, In-suk intended to revisit the rich second generation's house to inspect the scene again, but unexpectedly saw that the rich second generation had already arranged for everything in the house to be moved out. This inadvertently reminded In-suk that on the day of the incident, when his high heels stepped on the carpet next to the woman, it seemed to have kicked up some grey powder. So In-suk immediately took the shoes he wore that day to the forensic doctor. He asked the forensic doctor to examine his shoes, and after cutting off the soles, the forensic doctor found that there was indeed some powder stuck to them. After analysis by the pharmacologist, it was discovered that the powder was fluconazole, and fluconazole is a medication used to treat athlete's foot. However, a small dose would not cause death. But when the pharmacologist examined the medicine in the woman's clothes, he found that the heart medication capsules had signs of being opened. And what was inside was indeed fluconazole. This meant that when the woman took her heart medication, she was actually ingesting fluconazole, so the dosage would inevitably exceed safe limits, leading to death. Now, all they needed was to find the rich kid's fingerprints on the surface of the capsule to convict him. However, after searching for an entire day, they couldn't find any fingerprints. Since there were no fingerprints, it indicated that the person who filled the capsules had worn gloves, and there was indeed a pair of gloves at the scene that hadn't been examined yet, so they shifted their focus to the rubber gloves, hoping to find fingerprints left inside the gloves. That way they could determine who had filled the capsules. But the second court hearing was about to begin, so the forensic doctor had no choice but to present fluconazole as the cause of death, and let Ying Shuo attend the hearing first. During the trial, Ying Shuo produced evidence that the rich kid had purchased athlete's foot medication, as well as test results showing that the medication caused death, and accused the rich kid. However, the rich kid claimed that it was his wife who asked him to buy it, and he steadfastly refused to admit to the crime. While both sides were fiercely debating this point, the fingerprint comparison results from the forensic team finally came in. But to everyone's surprise, the fingerprints they ultimately found belonged to the deceased herself. The forensic doctor speculated that after suffering violence from her husband that day, the woman took advantage of his absence to personally plan her own death, intending to take revenge on her husband by making him the murderer. In the end, the rich kid was cleared of the murder charge and released as innocent. 3 years after the husband was buried, the wife claimed she was pregnant. To verify whether the child was really the husband's, they exhumed the body. They originally planned to rebury the corpse after collecting the DNA, but while gathering genetic samples, the forensic doctor discovered that the deceased had actually been murdered. When the deceased's 3 older sisters found out, they were immediately displeased. Their father's inheritance amounted to 20 billion. If it was proven that the woman's child belonged to their younger brother, they would receive 5 billion less. So the 3 of them caused a huge scene, snatched their brother's coffin, and took him to the crematorium, preparing to cremate the body. But when they opened the coffin, they found it completely empty. At this moment, the brother's body had already been taken back to the forensic center by the medical examiner. After a careful examination, the medical examiner found a 15-centimeter depression on the back of the man's head, and thus concluded that the man had definitely been murdered. As a result, the prosecution immediately listed the man's 3 sisters and his girlfriend as suspects. However, when Young Suk interrogated the 3 sisters separately, each of them pointed fingers at the others, accusing one another of being suspicious of killing their brother. And the only reason they gave for their accusations was because of the inheritance. But when interrogating the man's girlfriend, Choi Hwaja, she did not mention anything about the inheritance. Choi Hwaja said that back then, she was together with her boyfriend, but his sisters strongly opposed their relationship, and even restricted the two from seeing each other. After her boyfriend passed away, in order to keep the promise she made to him and help carry on his family line, she used his frozen sperm for artificial insemination. After a thorough investigation, however, the prosecution was unable to find any evidence. Just as the case had reached a deadlock, the forensic doctor detected propofol in the body. An overdose of propofol can cause respiratory failure and death. However, the man's death certificate stated that he died of natural causes. Therefore, the forensic doctor speculated that the perpetrator was very likely assisted by someone from the hospital at the time of the crime. So the prosecutors immediately went to the hospital to check the records of propofol usage from that year. Sure enough, they found that a nurse had checked out a large amount of propofol, but she had not registered who it was used for. Furthermore, during interviews at the hospital, they learned that this nurse had left the hospital shortly after the man's death and had been missing ever since. So the prosecution immediately began tracking the nurse's whereabouts. But the next day when they arrived at the nurse's home, they discovered that she had already been murdered. Moreover, the cause of her death was also a lethal injection of a large amount of propofol. It was obvious that the mastermind was silencing witnesses because the killer had worn gloves while committing the crime. At the scene, aside from a pile of syringes, they found nothing else. The autopsy only revealed a large amount of residual propofol. However, Ying Shaw suddenly remembered that when they arrived at the scene, the nurse's cuffs were unbuttoned. But since the killer was wearing gloves, it would have been impossible to unbutton the cuffs. So Ying Shaw believed there must be the killer's fingerprints on the buttons. So they immediately collected fingerprints from the buttons, and after special processing, they indeed found traces of drugs on them. Fragmented fingerprint traces. After fingerprint matching, the killer turned out to be the man's girlfriend, Kui Hwazi. So Ying Shaw immediately brought Kui Hwazi back to the prosecutor's office for investigation. However, Kui Hwazi only admitted to killing the nurse. She did not confess to having anything to do with her boyfriend's death. Just when Kui Hwazi thought that as long as she kept silent, the truth about what happened 3 years ago would never be uncovered, the forensic doctor discovered another clue on the man's corpse. From the records, they learned that the deceased was supposed to be 1.75 meters tall, but the body was only 1.65 meters. Moreover, when reconstructing the face from the skeleton, they found that the owner of these remains was not actually the deceased. So Ying Shaw immediately took the 2 photos and interrogated Kui Hwazi again. And after seeing the photos, Kui Hwazi finally confessed. He admitted to killing his boyfriend. He said that after killing his boyfriend back then, he started dating a new boyfriend, and the 2 of them even had a child together. They originally planned to use the child to obtain the rich heir's inheritance, but the 2 had a falling out during this period, so she killed her new boyfriend. After waiting 3 years for the bodies to decompose, he then swapped the 2 corpses. This way, the genetic tests would match, allowing him to claim a huge inheritance. With Kui Hwazi's confession, the prosecution quickly found the real body of the rich heir. As a result, Kui Hwazi soon faced trial. In court, Ying Shaw gave Kui Hwazi some good news. His child was indeed the rich heir's. But unfortunately, because Kui Hwazi was guilty of intentionally killing the rich heir, even though the child could inherit the fortune, Kui Hwazi could not act as the guardian to claim the inheritance on the child's behalf. In the end, all his efforts were in vain. This was a brutal and inhumane murder case. After the girl was killed, all 10 of her fingers were cut off and her head was wrapped in tape, mummifying her. The forensic examination revealed that her fingers had actually been cut off while she was still alive. Based on the method of the crime, the police speculated that this case might have been committed by the same person as the murder case from 7 years ago. Because the victims in both cases were women, and both died of suffocation after their mouths and noses were sealed with tape. The only difference was the severed fingers. However, the killer did not cut off the fingers to destroy fingerprints and hide the victim's identity, because the girl was killed in her own home. The police investigation revealed that the person who reported the crime that night was a pervert with a voyeuristic fetish. The voyeur said that he would spy on the victim's house from across the street every day, and he often secretly took intimate photos of her while she was alive. In the voyeur's camera, the police found that the time he took the photo of the murder was 1 a.m., and they also discovered photos showing that the murdered girl had previously lived with a man. After investigation, it was found that the deceased was named Xiao Qiao, a bar hostess, and the man she lived with was her brother, Dao Qi. However, they were not related by blood. Xiao Qiao was only Dao Qi's adopted sister, taken in by his father. But what's strange is that Dao Qi had already died in a cliff fall several days earlier. Now the only person connected to Xiao Qiao is her identical twin sister, Da Qiao. But when the detectives found Da Qiao's boyfriend, they discovered that Da Qiao had also gone missing several days earlier. According to her boyfriend, Da Qiao had been acting a bit strange before her disappearance. She had always refused premarital sex, but the day before she went missing, she suddenly took the initiative to sleep with him. After they spent the night together, her boyfriend was never able to contact Da Qiao again. After hearing this, the police immediately went to Da Qiao's residence to conduct a search. In the photos in her room, Lao Lu noticed that a bracelet Da Qiao was wearing in one of the pictures was exactly the same as the one found at Xiao Qiao's brother's cliff accident site. So they speculated that Da Qiao might have discovered that her younger sister had been bullied by her adoptive father's son for a long time. In order to avenge her sister, she lured her sister's brother to the edge of the cliff and pushed him off. But then, the group found several photos on Da Chao's computer related to the murder case from 7 years ago, and the way the victim died in those photos was exactly the same as Xiao Chao's. As a result, these photos immediately shifted the suspicion onto Da Chao. However, the two theories came into conflict. If Da Chao cared about her sister and killed the perverted brother to avenge her, then why would Da Chao kill her sister as well? To clear up the confusion, the policewoman went to the orphanage to find out about the sister's childhood. She wanted to know what the relationship between Da Chao and Xiao Chao was really like. From the old nurse at the orphanage, she learned that Da Chao had been very scheming since she was a child. Back then, in order to be adopted by a wealthy family, she deliberately scalded Yan Zhen, who was about to be adopted, with boiling water. Because Yan Zhen was injured, the wealthy family changed their mind and adopted Da Chao instead. After hearing about this incident, the policewoman then went to Yan Zhen's home. From Yan Zhen, it was revealed that besides hurting her, Da Chao had also harmed Xiao Chao. Yan Zhen said that there was always an unwritten rule in the orphanage. As long as a girl received a yellow hair clip on her head, that night the girl would be assaulted by the director. And when Da Chao got the hair clip, she put it on her younger sister instead, so that night, it was Xiao Chao who went to the director's room. Upon hearing this, the policewoman suddenly remembered that Da Chao's boyfriend had mentioned how Da Chao's personality had drastically changed the day before she disappeared. So, the policewoman made the following deduction. The person who died was actually Da Chao. It was Xiao Chao who killed her sister to take revenge, and then Xiao Chao deliberately cut off her sister's finger, wanting to experience what her sister had gone through. She started a new life under a different identity. Because they are identical twins, and fingerprints are the only thing that can distinguish between the two sisters. Plus, Xiao Chao had ample motive to kill her brother. If we follow this line of reasoning, as long as Xiao Chao is the murderer, then all the evidence fits. So, in order to draw out Xiao Chao, who was hiding her identity, the team leader had his superior hold a press conference. The announcement stated that they had determined Xiao Chao's death was the work of the same killer from the duct tape murder case 7 years ago, and they also used the news to notify Da Chao to come and claim his sister's body. Sure enough, the next day, Da Chao showed up, his eyes full of tears as he asked if his sister was here, and when he arrived, both of his hands were wrapped in gauze. After questioning, they learned that his hands had been scalded by boiling water a few days earlier. The fingerprints on the younger sister had been destroyed, and the older sister's fingers were also burnt, leaving no fingerprints. This undoubtedly made the task force even more certain that he was Xiao Chao, so the task force immediately used a polygraph to question him about his life at the wealthy family's home. However, after the interrogation, they found that everything he said was true, and from Da Chao's own words, they learned that he really was the older sister, Da Chao, and that the person who had died was his younger sister, Xiao Chao. Da Chao said that before the new year, he gave the wealthy adoptive parents to his younger sister, while he stayed at the orphanage and continued living under his sister's identity. As for the matter of the yellow hair clip, it was because after he learned that the director had given the hair clip to his younger sister, he tricked his sister into giving it to him, and then took her place to endure the director's inhumane torture. The reason he knew about his sister's experiences living with the wealthy family was because a few days earlier, his sister had found him and given him a diary she had kept since childhood. His sister said that he was terminally ill, and he wanted his older sister to live on using his identity. In order to let his sister live happily, his sister killed the adoptive brother, who had been abusing her, and then tricked her sister into hiding. As for his sister's death, the police soon uncovered the truth. They found a video that his sister had recorded for her older sister before her death in the fish tank of the room where she was killed. At the beginning of the video, the younger sister tells her older sister that she must live on using her identity, but later in the video, it shows the younger sister cutting off her own finger and wrapping tape around her own face. She did all of this so that her older sister could start a new life using her identity. At this point, everyone in the task force fell silent. In the end, the case was officially closed as a suicide.